When you think of the busiest metro systems in the world, your mind might go to New York or perhaps Tokyo or Shanghai. But with more pre-COVID riders than the Hong Kong MTR on a smaller overall network, the Sao Paulo Metro is quite possibly the most heavily used metro system in the world, and just part of a massive rail network that keeps this mountain-encircled Manhattan moving. So let's dive in and learn more about the railways of Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is a proper megacity, with over 20 million people living in its metro region, making it by some measures the 4th or 5th largest city in the world. The city is broadly divided into north and south sections by the Tietê River that runs east-west across it and is hemmed in on all sides by hills and mountains on a high plain roughly 50 kilometers from the Atlantic coast. The city center is located to the south of the city's 3 major train stations: Reece to the east, the beautiful historic Luz in the center of the city, and Barra Funda to the west. That said, actually identifying the city center is hard for an untrained eye, because urban Sao Paulo is absolutely covered in high-rise apartment buildings. For air travel, Sao Paulo relies on 2 major airports, both with 2 runways: Congonhas to the south that mostly handles domestic traffic, and Guarulhos to the north that handles international flights. With those details out of the way, let's dive into the current rapid transit system serving the city, consisting of the metro and the suburban trains, which are mostly run by the CPTM. The metro and suburban trains follow the same numbering and color scheme and are really well integrated, something that many North American and Asian cities could learn a lot from. It's also worth noting that most lines on the Sao Paulo Metro move many hundreds of thousands of riders a day, which are very respectable numbers, despite not being all that lengthy. The system is also generally really modern, with CBTC signaling and platform screen doors and gates even being retrofitted at some stations. The oldest lines on the metro all use 1600mm mainline gauge track and 750V DC third rail for power. The first line to open in 1974 was Line 1, which is colored blue and is a 20km 23-station line, running north-south through central Sao Paulo, connecting Luz Station with major long-distance bus terminals at the north and south of the city. The southern section of the line is entirely below ground under a single wide avenue, while to the north of the city it pops above ground several times. Line 1 is the only metro line that currently crosses the Tietê River. Speaking of Line 1, it's worth mentioning that the Series 100 metro trains, or Type A, were manufactured based on designs by American car builder Budd. Have you ever thought that the oldest trains used on BART look very unique internationally? Well, the Series 100 trains actually have a very similar design, especially before their front fascias were repainted from white. Next up is Line 2, which opened in 1991 and is colored green, with 14 stations over 15 kilometers of track. Line 2 was originally designed as a northern branch of Line 1 along Avenue Paulista, Sao Paulo's central business district, and evidence of this is visible where the lines diverge at Paraíso Station, including through a one-directional cross-platform transfer. However, it was decided to build Line 2 as an independent line, and now after its 2 interchanges with Line 1, it extends to the southeast and then back north. Almost all of Line 2 is underground, with only 2 short sections popping above the surface. The red Line 3 is the most used line on the metro, with over 800,000 riders every day on its 22km 18-station route, which is entirely above ground outside of the city center, as well as where it connects to suburban trains on the west at Barra Funda and at the east at Reece. Meanwhile, the underground central connection to Line 1 at Sé Station is the busiest interchange in the network. The line opened in 1979, and much of it was built on underused railway right-of-way. Now, to truly appreciate Line 3, we need to actually dive into the suburban network. The system, which is mostly run by CPTM, is the urban mainline railway in Sao Paulo, and its lines are all broad 1600mm Victorian gauge and electrified at 3000V DC with overhead wires. With up to 8 car electrical multiple unit trains with high platforms, it's quite comparable to a metro system, and its lines get numbers in Sao Paulo just as with the metro. A good comparison system might be the JR East Suburban Railway in Tokyo. Trains go up to 90 km/h and operate on a mix of elevated and at-grade tracks, with level crossings in lower density areas but complete grade separation nearer to the center of the city. Now, I should say, if you liked this video, make sure to tell YouTube and give it a like, and also consider subscribing for more transit explainers about cities around the world. Line 11 of the Suburban Railway parallels Line 3 of the Metro from Bross East, where it's operated as the corridor's express service since its modernization in the late 20th century, with Line 3 running the local service. Line 11 also continues west of Bross onwards to Luz, as well as much further east, with 16 stations total along a roughly 51-kilometer route. As it turns out, there are 3 other suburban rail lines that travel east from Bross, including the 39-kilometer 13-station Line 12 to the east, paralleling and terminating along Line 11, and an hourly express service starting at Barafunda, traveling to Guarulhos Airport. This is on top of the more frequent but rather inconvenient 3-stop 12-kilometer Line 13 airport shuttle that travels to the airport from Line 12. I should say that saying these routes travel to the airport is generous, as the station is some distance away from the terminal, and you are in all certainty going to need a bus to make the final connection. There is going to be a people mover opening in 2024, but a direct connection is almost always best, and in its current state, this feels like a pretty poor air rail link. There's also the 37-kilometer 15-station Line 10, which travels to the southeast of the city, and even features limited express services. But, as it turns out today, this service runs through Bross and Luz onto the 18-station 61-kilometer Line 7 to the northwest, on what is creatively known as the 710 service. Now, let's talk about the Metro again. The newer lines on the system have actually begun to use 1500-volt DC overhead line power and standard gauge, as is common on new Metro lines around the world. Line 4 opened in 2010, and is colored yellow and has 11 stations over about 13 kilometers of track, all of which is underground, and some of which is extremely deep underground. Line 4 is one of the most modern subways in the Americas, with platform screen doors at all stations and fully automated 6-car subway trains from Hyundai Rotem. The line runs from an interchange with the Suburban Rail and Line 1 at Luz in the north to the southwest, connecting to Line 2 on the way and forming a triangle transfer. In an annoying habit for the city, Line 4 uses a different logo from other Metro lines as it's run as a P3 with a private operator, although in practice, interchanges between Line 4 and other lines are seamless. Line 5 has a purple lilac color and was opened in 2002. The line has 17 stations over 20 kilometers of track and was originally planned as part of the Suburban system, and upon its initial opening, it was only connected to other Suburban lines. However, in 2019, it was extended to connect to the rest of the Metro directly. The line runs from Line 2 southwest to Line 1 and then beyond into outlying parts of the city. Like Line 4, Line 5 is operated by a private operator, and like Istanbul M2, Sao Paulo Line 5 also has a station on a cable-stayed bridge. West of the bridge, the line is all elevated, while to the east, most of it is underground. I do want to note that the station entry canopies on the newest stations are particularly notable in my eyes, because they are gigantic and entirely glass, similar to Hudson Yards or Canary Wharf. To add, there are also 2 suburban lines to the west that were formerly run by the CPTM, and both are operated by the same private operator as Metro Line 5. One of them is Line 8, which terminates at its own station just west of Luz and runs west with 24 stations over 42 kilometers of track. There's also Line 9, which runs south from Line 8 on a 33-kilometer 20-station route mostly along a riverbank that intersects with Metro Lines 4 and 5 on the way. The last currently open Metro line is a monorail. Yep, you heard that right. Line 15, which opened in 2014 and is colored silver, is a 15-kilometer 11-station monorail line built using driverless Bombardier and Novia monorail technology, with higher capacity than almost any other monorail in the world given its long 7-segment trains. Like other straddle beam monorails, it runs on rubber tires along a mostly concrete beam, and is powered by a 750-volt DC third rail. The line is, of course, fully elevated and runs east from the southeastern terminus of Line 2. Now, as you'd probably guess, Sao Paulo is embarking on a number of transit expansion projects to expand service and capacity as a large and growing city. There are a ton of plans, but in this video I'll only highlight the under construction projects. Line 2 will be extended northeast 8 kilometers and 8 stops to Line 3 along Line 11. But currently, this isn't a station where Line 11 stops, and so a new station will be constructed at the site to provide connections between all 3 services. Line 15 is also getting a minor 2-station 3-kilometer eastern extension deeper into the suburbs. The city is also getting 2 new metro lines, the furthest along of which is Line 17, which is gold, a color chosen along with Line 15's silver because the city was planning on building 3 monorail lines in the run-up to the 2014 FIFA World Cup Brazil. The other was naturally going to be the Bronze Line, which was set to serve areas in the south of Sao Paulo, which would have seriously improved connectivity in that part of the city. Back to Line 17, the route is an 8-station, 18-kilometer line which travels northwest and southeast from Line 5, providing connections to Line 9 on the west and to Congonhas Airport on one of its 2 branches in the southeast. Like Line 15, Line 17 will be fully elevated. The line is supposed to open in early 2026, which is kind of wild as it's looked pretty complete for well over a year. There's also the Orange Line 6. This line will run northwest from an interchange with Line 1, intersecting with Line 4 on the way, as well as Line 7 and beyond. The line will be fully underground and the deepest metro line in Latin America, and with some sections over 60 meters below ground, with a surface yard at one end as with Line 4. I think in many ways, Line 6 actually sort of feels like a mirror of Metro Line 2. Much like Line 4, Line 6 will use automated trains, however these ones will be from Alstom, as with Sydney Metro, Montreal's REM, the Grand Paris Express, and its Latin American sibling, Santiago Line 7. But perhaps the projects that seem the most promising to me are 1. A circular line which enables connections outside of central areas of this incredibly dense metropolis, and 2. RER-like tunnels which could ensure all major suburban rail services run across the region, perhaps in a similar vein to the projects being planned in Buenos Aires. Fortunately, Sao Paulo is getting some more rail through operation, as Line 11 will be extended west from Luz to Barra Funda, significantly increasing service levels and capacity. Unfortunately, the existing suburban rail network is being balkanized and handed over to private operators, as has already happened with Lines 8 and 9, and that may well reduce the likelihood of new through-running service arrangements occurring. No doubt there have been through-running arrangements in places like France and Japan that did have multiple operators, but it doesn't seem like a helpful thing to that type of arrangement. And sadly, it actually seems likely that the 710 service will be split once again, despite naturally being quite popular. All in all, Sao Paulo is one of those huge cities with a sprawling regional train network and a modern high-capacity metro that people often forget about, far too often in my opinion. The city has a great example to set for other urban areas like Los Angeles, Toronto, and beyond, in creating a coherent region-wide public transit system while also accommodating incredible density.